Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really digging into how narratives get constructed.
Exactly.
We'll be looking at the facts that sometimes get left out, and how that shapes what we think of as, well, truth.
Yeah, it's like peeling an onion.
Mhm.
And our source material today, it really dives into this idea that conflicting histories, conflicting ideas can actually both have some truth to them.
Right.
So our goal isn't to pick sides. We're just laying out these different perspectives, these sort of countervailing positions from the source and letting you, the listener, kind of synthesize it all.
And we've got some pretty diverse topics lined up: geopolitics, history, hidden stuff.
Yeah, definitely some things that might make you rethink common assumptions.
Okay, let's jump right in. The source makes a pretty bold claim to start, that Ashkenazi Jewish immigrants basically created the template for modern terrorism in the Middle East.
It's a stark assertion. And the source backs it up with specific events.
Like the 1948 Deir Yassin attack, it calls it a terrorist attack by Jewish paramilitary groups.
Ergun and Lehi, specifically, with Haganah support mentioned too.
Right, and Haganah, that later became part of the Israeli military.
Exactly. This was just, what, a month and a bit before Israel was founded.
And the source details the killing of civilians, men, women, children. It even mentions claims of mutilation, though it notes they're unverifiable.
Then there's the King David Hotel bombing.
Also Ergun, again with Haganah support, targeting the British headquarters in Palestine.
The source frames that one as an act of war against the British. And the connection the source draws is, well, pretty significant. It points out that many involved in Ergun and Lehi weren't really punished.
Right.
And are even, celebrated by some in Israel today. It mentions Menachem Begin, former Ergun leader, becoming prime minister.
In 1977, yeah.
And Yitzhak Shamir, former Lehi leader, also PM, twice.
Wow.
So the source argues, if you know this history, it helps explain why some Arabs have such deep-seated disdain for the state of Israel. It's part of their narrative.
Okay, so shifting focus slightly. We often hear today that the UN is, well, anti-Semitic because of all the resolutions against Israel.
And you can see why people might think that just based on the sheer number of resolutions.
Sure.
But the source presents the flip side. It highlights how the UN was actually crucial in Israel's creation.
Resolution 181.
Exactly. That's the one. It provided the basis for creating both a Jewish state and a Palestinian state in the old British Mandate territory.
That often gets lost, doesn't it?
It really does.
And here's a detail from the source I found fascinating. Resolution 181 had support from both the U.S. and the Soviet Union.
Yeah, quite the pairing.
The source suggests the Soviets were initially quite supportive. Why? Because many Jews were sympathetic to communism, shared political outlooks, pointing to early Israel being secular, socialist, the whole kibbutz system.
Right. And the source also brings in another angle. Some religious Jews actually opposed Zionism and the state's creation. They saw it as usurping the Messiah's role. Like, the Messiah comes first, then the state is established. That was their view.
Interesting.
So the source kind of poses this question. If America is seen as blessed through Israel, shouldn't Russia and the UN get some acknowledgement too?
Because they played a key role in its founding.
Exactly. Especially Russia, the source notes, given how many Russian citizens also hold Israeli citizenship today, it implies a sort of historical debt.
Okay, let's talk about the land itself, the Holy Land. The modern Zionist claim often centers on God's promises in the Old Testament.
Right, but the source immediately points out this isn't universally accepted, even among Jews. Many religious Jews are anti-Zionist.
We just touched on that.
Yeah, and then you have secular, even atheist Jews who are strong nationalists for, historical or racial reasons, the history of Jewish suffering being key.
So not just a religious claim.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And putting religion aside for a moment, the source argues that the idea that just because a group used to live somewhere means they're entitled to it now, well, that sets a problematic precedent.
So how does the source frame the historical loss of Jewish control?
It points to 70 A.D., the destruction of Jerusalem, calls it one of history's most legitimate examples of subjugation.
Why legitimate in the source's view?
It cites reasons like Jews persecuting Christians back then and continuing temple sacrifices the source deems inefficacious.
Meaning not effective or wanted by God anymore from that perspective.
Right. And it says when the Jews rebelled in 66 A.D., even though Rome had given them quite a bit of freedom.
They were seen as betrayers.
Exactly. Abject betrayers is the phrase used.
And the consequences.
Massive. The temple destroyed. The Jewish people scoured, basically dispersed, barred from worshiping there.
And the land itself.
Judea was renamed Palestina. It became a major Christian center for centuries, mostly Greek-speaking. Jerusalem even became a patriarchal see in 451 AD.
So a completely different identity for the region.
For a long time, yes. Then, about 200 years later, Arab-Muslim conquests.
Right.
Jerusalem becomes an Islamic center and mostly stays under Islamic rule, apart from the Crusader periods.
So the source's bottom line is?
From 70 AD all the way to 1948, no Jewish state, independent or even provincial, existed in the Levant. Almost 1,900 years.
That's a long time.
It is. And this leads the source to make a really provocative comparison.
Which is?
If Jews have a right to the land based on ancient residency, then the source argues the claims of North American indigenous peoples are just as valid.
Meaning?
Meaning, by Israeli standards, as the source puts it, every country in the Americas should technically be dismantled.
Wow. That's quite the statement.
It is, and it pushes further.
How so?
It addresses the argument some Westerners might make about the New World, that indigenous people were pagan savages, so taking the land was justified. The source says, well, a similar argument could be made about Jews claiming they've been estranged from God for centuries, so they aren't entitled to the territory either.
Now, just to be clear, the source isn't endorsing that view.
No, absolutely not. It presents it as a parallel line of argument, exploring the logic used in entitlement claims, without agreeing with the underlying premise. It's about comparing the justifications.
Got it. That's a crucial distinction. Then the source asks this question. If Jews are entitled, which Jews?
Right. This goes into alleged internal discrimination within Israel. It's quite uncomfortable territory.
What does it claim?
It claims, for instance, that Ethiopian Jews aren't seen as authentically Jewish by some other Israeli Jews. It even cites alleged persecution, like forced contraception.
That's a serious allegation.
Very. It also mentions Sephardic Jews reportedly facing discrimination, not being seen as fully Jewish.
Which the source calls ironic.
Yeah, because Sephardic Jews were the majority in Palestine before Israel's creation. It even references an account by Jack Bernstein, an American Ashkenazi Jew, who wrote about facing discrimination himself just for marrying a Sephardic woman in Israel.
So the picture the source paints is
that Israel isn't necessarily a state for all Jews or even all practitioners of Judaism, but primarily for Ashkenazi Jews, secular or religious.
And it excludes Christian Jews.
Explicitly mentions proselytizing as illegal. So yes, it argues that despite a liberal facade, it's highly discriminatory in practice, even against smaller groups like the Karaites.
Who are the Karaites?
A different Jewish religious movement, distinct from mainstream rabbinic Judaism.
Okay. This definitely adds layers to the identity question.
For sure.
All right, let's shift gears. Moving from Israel to Iran. The source claims Western powers have a long history of meddling in Iran, including regime change.
Yeah, it lays out a pattern across the 20th century. Starts in 1921, a British-backed coup for Reza Khan.
Okay.
Then 1941, Britain and the Soviets actually invaded Iran and kicked out Reza Shah Pahlavi.
Wow, invaded.
Yep. And then the really famous one, 1953, the U.S. and U.K. coup against Mossadegh.
The democratically elected prime minister.
Right, in favor of the Shah, who they saw as, more friendly to Western interests.
And even the 1979 Islamic Revolution?
The source doesn't say the West caused it, but argues it was permitted to happen. That the Shah and his government were basically abandoned by their allies.
So the implication is?
That this long history of interference understandably breeds distrust, even hatred of the West among Iranians. Even those who don't like the current Islamic Republic.
That makes sense, given that history.
Definitely. Now, the source goes deeper into the Iran-Iraq War.
Right.
And it makes some really serious claims about Western complicity in Saddam Hussein's use of chemical weapons.
Complicity how?
It says the West didn't just let Saddam have chemical weapons, but actually helped him get them.
Helped?
By allowing Western companies to sell Iraq chemicals that could be used for weapons dual-use exports.
And didn't the U.S. also give Saddam other kinds of support?
Yes. The source mentions conventional weapons, intelligence, even spy satellite data and aid.
While he was using chemical weapons against Iran.
Exactly. The human cost was enormous. The source cites figures like 20,000 Iranians killed by these weapons and 100,000 more crippled.
Just horrific.
Truly.
But then the source adds a twist about Iran's leader at the time, Ayatollah Khomeini.
Yeah, this is counterintuitive. It says Khomeini was so horrified by chemical weapons that he issued a fatwa against developing or using them.
A religious prohibition.
Right. And his successor, Ayatollah Khamenei, apparently formalized this in the mid-90s, banning chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons development and use.
So according to the source and this fatwa,
it would be illegal under the Islamic Republic's own rules for Iran to build nuclear weapons.
Interesting.
The source argues Iran hasn't actually had a nuclear weapons program, despite claims, but wants nuclear energy, something the previous Shah also wanted.
And it mentions the U.S. position on this.
Yeah. It notes the U.S. admitted, before amending its stance recently, around the time of the Israel-Iran war of last month, that Iran wasn't developing a weapon. This really muddies the waters on Iran's nuclear intentions.
There's also a fascinating detour about Germany in this section.
Right. Germany also apparently provided some chemicals for Saddam's program, and Germany has its own pretty extensive history with chemical weapons.
Sarin gas.
Exactly. Developed by German scientists in 1938 while working on pesticides, believe it or not.
And it's still considered incredibly potent today.
Absolutely. Still stockpiled.
But the source points out something strange. Hitler's government made tons of it, 30,000 tons, but never used it in the war.
Yeah, it's a historical puzzle. The source floats a theory.
Which is?
That Hitler, because he'd been gassed in World War I, was personally against using chemical weapons unless the enemy used them first. So the Allies were apparently baffled after the war why these weapons weren't deployed, especially against the Soviets who hadn't signed the Geneva Convention on Chemical Warfare.
And the source suggests this non-use might have actually contributed to Germany losing.
It does suggest that, yeah. A strange historical what-if.
Okay, final section. Let's talk about state power and specifically some hidden histories concerning the U.S. The source uses Saddam Hussein again here.
Right. He was friendly with the U.S., even offered help after 9/11, according to the source.
And yet
he fell out of favor and was overthrown. The source uses this to illustrate its point. Being America's ally offers no guarantee against betrayal.
A bleak outlook on international relations.
Well, the source argues America isn't uniquely moral on the world stage. Not that others are better necessarily, but that all states commit evil. That's the core idea.
And we shouldn't forget that.
Exactly. The source seems to believe ultimate hope doesn't lie with the state, any state.
This leads into a critique of the American self-image, right? The city on a hill.
Yeah, a really strong critique. The source argues you can't celebrate the Constitution and Declaration of Independence without acknowledging that the same system, the same spirit, also allowed for some truly terrible things.
And it lists examples.
A disturbing list. MK Ultra.
The mind control experiments.
Tuskegee syphilis experiment.
Infamous.
Experiments involving injecting pregnant women with plutonium.
Unbelievable.
Alleged plots like Operation Northwoods, COINTELPRO, Operation Mockingbird, St. Louis poisonings.
A lot of covert, unethical government actions.
Definitely. And the source makes a point of highlighting how African Americans were disproportionately victimized in many of these, used as human experiments.
Stressing that no group should ever face that.
Absolutely. The source's conclusion here is pretty blunt.
Which is? That
the U.S. isn't some exceptional city on a hill. It's a state like any other. Just one that happens to have immense resources, allowing its citizens superficially better lives than many elsewhere.
And it uses the phrase spiritually dead.
Yes. Claiming America became spiritually dead after its revolution, allowing this kind of internal depravity and enabling it in allies, too.
That's a profound charge.
It is. And it connects this alleged spiritual state to current events.
How so?
It suggests the decline in American culture, social cohesion, the rise in violence. That this was maybe inevitable.
And the solution, according to the source?
A radical one.
Yeah.
Repudiating the America of old, its liberal democratic values, and forming a new type of America. What that means exactly is left open, but it's a call for fundamental change.
Wow. Okay. We've covered a lot of ground, a lot of challenging perspectives from our source material today.
We certainly have.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, the main takeaway, I think, is just how vital it is to look beyond those simple, single narratives.
Definitely. To see the complexity, the different viewpoints, even when they make us uncomfortable or question things we thought we knew.
It's about getting a fuller picture, right?
Exactly. So the encouragement for you, our listener, is really to embrace that critical thinking. Question the assumptions. Always look for multiple angles when you encounter information.
Because knowledge isn't just about collecting facts. It's about understanding them, applying them.
Couldn't agree more.
So maybe a final thought to leave you with, based on everything we've discussed. Given all these complex, often conflicting stories about how states are formed, about the actions of powerful nations, about hidden histories, what does it actually mean to pursue truth, whether as a society or just as an individual? Especially when that pursuit forces you to question the very foundations of what you've always been taught.